Welcome to the channel where we share raw, real stories of betrayal and redemption. If you've ever felt erased by the ones who should love you most, this story's for you. Stick around. I'm Mara, 19, a college sophomore studying environmental science in Seattle. I just returned from a volunteer trip to Costa Rica where I'd spent 2 weeks building homes for families who'd lost everything in a flood. The work was brutal: scorching sun, thick mud clinging to my boots, nights on a cot with mosquitoes buzzing like a chorus of tiny chainsaws. But it meant everything to me. I'd scraped together every penny for that trip, juggling late-night waitressing shifts at a greasy diner and selling upcycled clothes online. I'd even skipped meals to save up, dreaming of the moment I'd collapse into my bed, my creaky, lumpy sanctuary with its sage-green walls and fairy lights that made everything feel safe. I pictured the soft glow, the faint lavender scent of my pillow, the hum of my fan lulling me to sleep. Instead, I walked into a nightmare that shattered my world. I stepped off the plane, my body screaming from exhaustion. My backpack felt like a boulder, stuffed with souvenirs I'd hunted down for my family: a hand-woven bracelet for Mom, its beads glinting with the colors of the Costa Rican sky, a carved wooden coaster for Dad, etched with a tiny palm tree, and a set of vintage guitar picks for my brother, Ethan, who'd been obsessed with music since he was 14. I'd spent hours at a dusty market, haggling in broken Spanish with a vendor who barely cracked a smile, just so I could see their faces light up. I imagined Mom slipping the bracelet on, Dad chuckling at the coaster, Ethan actually thanking me for once. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd see how much I cared, how hard I'd tried to connect with them. I was so naive. The cab dropped me off at our suburban home, the streetlights casting long shadows across the lawn. I dragged myself to the door, my sneakers leaving faint mud prints on the welcome mat. The air inside hit me like a wall, thick with the smell of fresh paint and sawdust, a sharp tang that made my nose sting. Something was wrong. Guitar riffs and a thumping bass line echoed from upstairs, loud and jarring. I called out, "I'm back." My voice sounded small, swallowed by the noise. Mom appeared from the living room, her hair tied back, a distracted smile on her face. "Oh, Mara, you're here," she said, like I'd just run to the store for milk. No hug. No, how was your trip? Just that hollow greeting. My stomach twisted, a cold knot forming. "We've made some changes while you were gone," she added, her tone too casual, like she was talking about rearranging the furniture. "Changes?" I asked, my voice tight, barely above a whisper. She hesitated, her eyes flicking away for a second before she said, "Ethan needed a proper space for his music. We turned your room into his studio." The words hit me like a slap, sharp and stinging. I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh, to say it was a joke. She didn't. My legs felt like lead as I climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last, dread pooling in my chest like ice water. My door, the one with the dent from when I'd accidentally kicked it at 15, was wide open. Inside, my fairy lights were gone. My bed, my desk, my shelves gone. The walls were now a stark gray, covered in soundproofing foam that looked like it was suffocating the room. A sleek mixing board sat where my bed used to be, its lights blinking like a taunt. Ethan's guitars lined the wall, polished and proud. He was hunched over a laptop, headphones on, oblivious to me standing there, frozen, my breath shallow. "Careful," he muttered, not even looking up. "I just set up the mics." I couldn't speak. My throat burned, a lump so tight I thought I might choke. Everything I'd built in that room, my late-night study sessions, the journal entries I'd poured my heart into, the Polaroids of my high school friends taped to the wall, was erased. I backed out, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall, and stumbled downstairs. Dad was in the kitchen, scrolling on his phone, a glass of water in front of him. "Hey, kid," he said, barely glancing up. "Ethan's got a real shot at making it big with his band. You're off to college soon anyway. Don't make a fuss." A fuss? My entire existence had been packed up and tossed aside, and I wasn't supposed to make a fuss? I went to the garage where they'd said my stuff was. Cardboard boxes were stacked haphazardly in a damp corner, labeled Mara's junk in Mom's sharp handwriting. I opened one, and the smell of mildew hit me like a punch. My books, dog-eared novels I'd read a dozen times, were ruined, their pages curling. My favorite sweater, the one I'd worn through every heartbreak, was crumpled at the bottom, reeking of motor oil. I sat on the cold concrete floor, holding that sweater to my chest, and felt something break inside me, not loud, not dramatic, but a quiet snap, like a thread stretched too thin for too long. I'd spent my whole life being the easy one, the one who never complained, who made it work no matter how much it hurt. And this was my reward: erased, discarded, reduced to junk. I didn't yell. I didn't slam doors. I pulled my house key off its ring, the one I'd had since middle school with the little dolphin charm I'd picked out at a fair, and set it on the kitchen counter with a soft clink. Mom looked up from her phone, her brow furrowing. "What are you doing?" she asked, her tone sharp, almost accusing. "You're not even 20 yet, Mara. Don't be ridiculous." Dad chimed in, his voice flat. "You're overreacting." "Stop it." But I wasn't overreacting. For the first time I saw them clearly. They weren't going to change. I turned and walked out, my backpack still on, the door clicking shut behind me with a finality that echoed in my chest. The Seattle air outside was cold, the kind of damp chill that seeps into your bones and makes your teeth chatter. I didn't know where I was going. My best friend, Lila, lived across town. She'd always said I could crash with her if things got bad. Or maybe I'd find a 24-hour diner, sit in a booth with a cup of cheap coffee, and pretend I had a plan. I just knew I couldn't stay. People always say you must have seen the signs, but when you grow up being quietly ignored, you learn to ignore yourself too. I'd been doing it for years, convincing myself their neglect was normal, that I was the problem for wanting more. I was 10 when I first noticed how different things were. Ethan and I are 2 years apart. He's older, but he's always been the golden child. He'd throw tantrums and Mom would drop everything to soothe him, her voice soft, her hands gentle. I'd sit in my room, coloring alone, waiting for someone to notice I hadn't eaten dinner. When I won a science fair in middle school, a project I'd spent weeks on, Dad said, "That's nice," without looking up from his laptop. But when Ethan got a C in math, they hired a tutor, took him out for ice cream, told him he'd get it next time. I learned to be independent because I had to be. I got a part-time job at 16, paid for my own phone, figured out college applications alone. They called me mature. What they meant was invisible. The room wasn't just a room. It was the last piece of me they hadn't taken. They didn't even check on me during my trip, not a single text, not a call. "We didn't want to bother you," Mom said later, as if that explained it. They'd always had a way of wrapping their neglect in excuses, making it sound like love. "We're giving you space, Mara. You're so good on your own." I used to believe it. But sitting on a park bench that night, my backpack beside me, the drizzle soaking through my jacket, I let myself feel it all, the years of being unseen, the ache of wanting them to care. It wasn't a loud cry, just a slow, burning release, tears mixing with the rain on my face. I thought about my great-aunt Clara, my mom's aunt who lived in a small assisted living home near Tacoma. I hadn't seen her in months, but she'd always been different, sharp, warm, the kind of person who looked at you like you mattered. When I was little, she'd sneak me extra cookies at family gatherings, whispering, "Don't tell your mom," with a wink that made me feel like we shared a secret. I needed that now, someone who'd see me. I decided I'd visit her soon, not to ask for help, but just to feel grounded again, to remember what it felt like to be seen. Lila let me crash on her couch, but it was temporary. Her parents were kind, but I could feel their unease, the awkward pauses when I walked into the kitchen, the polite questions about my plans. "Are you sure your parents are okay with this?" her mom asked, her smile tight, her eyes darting to the clock. I nodded, but I knew I couldn't stay long. I had finals in 3 weeks, no clean clothes, and nowhere to call home. Ethan had a music studio, his guitars gleaming under studio lights. I had a borrowed blanket and a toothbrush I'd bought at a gas station. The silence from my parents was deafening, not a call, not a text, not even a "Are you okay?" It hurt, but it wasn't a surprise. What surprised me was how much I'd expected them to care, even after everything. I went to see Clara a few days later. Her assisted living home smelled like antiseptic and burnt toast, but her room was a little oasis, lace curtains filtering the gray light, a faded quilt draped over her chair, a photo of her late husband on the nightstand, his smile frozen in time. I didn't plan to tell her much. I thought we'd just sit, maybe play cards, talk about her old travel stories. But the moment I sat down, she fixed me with her sharp gray eyes and said, "What's wrong, kiddo?" Her voice was gentle but firm, like she could see right through me. I tried to laugh it off, my voice shaky. "Just figuring out life," I said, staring at the floor. She didn't buy it. By the time I finished my second cup of chamomile tea, the steam curling in the air, I'd spilled everything, the trip, the room, the way my parents had boxed up my life without a second thought, the silence that followed. I expected her to pat my hand, say something comforting, maybe tell me to go back and talk to them. Instead, she nodded, her lips tight, and said, "Good. You're free now." I blinked, confused, my mug still warm in my hands. "Free." She leaned forward, her voice steady, her eyes blazing with a fierceness I hadn't expected. "They can't hold you back anymore. You're done with them." Then she reached into her nightstand and pulled out a manila envelope, thick and slightly creased, sealed with a rubber band. "This isn't charity," she said before I could protest, her tone leaving no room for argument. "It's a head start. Inside were legal documents, bank account details, a letter to her lawyer. She'd been planning this for months, setting aside funds for me, knowing I'd need an escape one day. "I can't give you a home," she said, her voice softening, "but I can give you wings." Her words hit me like a wave, crashing over me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. I'd spent so long feeling like a ghost in my own family, but here was someone who'd seen me all along, who'd prepared for this moment before I even knew I'd need it. I didn't take the envelope right away. "Clara, I can't take this from you," I said, my voice shaky, tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. She waved me off, her hand trembling slightly but her resolve firm. "I'm not losing anything. I'm gaining the chance to see you soar." That night, I sat on Lila's couch, the envelope in my lap, and opened it with trembling hands. There was no cash, just documents and a note in Clara's neat handwriting. "You're enough, Mara. Always have been." I pressed the note to my chest, my breath hitching, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. What about you? Has someone ever believed in you when you couldn't believe in yourself? Share their story in the comments. I'd love to hear who gave you wings when you needed them most. The next week was a blur, a whirlwind of hope and fear. Clara's lawyer helped me access the funds, enough to rent a tiny studio apartment near campus. It was barely 300 square feet, with a flickering light in the bathroom and a window that wouldn't open, but it was mine. The walls were a faded beige, the floor scuffed, but I could already see myself making it home, maybe a string of lights, a thrifted rug, a space that was mine. I slept on a sleeping bag the first few nights, the hardwood cold against my back, but I'd never felt safer. I still visited Clara every few days. We'd sit on her little balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, filling out paperwork together. She'd tell me stories about her first job as a librarian, the time she backpacked through Europe in the 60s, how she once outsmarted a car salesman with a smile and a handshake. Those moments felt like healing, like stitching myself back together, piece by piece. But peace never lasts long, does it? I started noticing things. Missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. A strange car parked near my apartment for too long, its windows tinted dark. I told myself I was paranoid, that I was just adjusting to this new life, the weight of independence pressing down on me. I didn't realize the storm was already brewing, gathering strength in the shadows. One evening, I got home from a late shift at the diner, my feet aching, my apron still smelling like fries and spilled coffee. There was a knock at the door, sharp, insistent, the kind that makes your heart jump into your throat. I opened it, and there they were, Mom and Dad, standing on my doorstep, looking like they'd rehearsed this moment. Mom's makeup was flawless, her smile too bright, like she was trying to sell me something. Dad stood stiff, arms crossed, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. "We need to talk," Mom said, her voice clipped, cutting through the quiet of the hallway. No hello, no apology, just that demand. I didn't let them in, just stood in the doorway, my hand gripping the frame, waiting. "We know what you did," Dad said, his tone cold, each word a jab. "Clara's not well. She's confused. You took advantage of her." My breath caught, a sharp inhale that burned my lungs. "What are you talking about?" I asked, though I already knew, the pieces clicking into place like a trap snapping shut. Mom's voice trembled, but it wasn't real emotion, just a performance, one I'd seen 100 times. "You manipulated her into giving you her money. That's elder abuse, Mara." I couldn't help it. I laughed, a short, bitter sound that felt like it was ripped from my chest. "She gave it to me. She planned it. I didn't ask for anything. You expect us to believe that?" Mom snapped, her mask slipping, her eyes flashing with something dangerous. Dad pulled out a legal document, the kind with an official letterhead that makes your stomach drop, the paper crisp and threatening. "We're taking this to court," he said, his voice low, final. "You'll hear from our lawyer." They turned and left, their footsteps echoing down the hall like a drumbeat of doom. I closed the door, my hands shaking, and slid to the floor, my back against the wood. Elder abuse. They were accusing me of exploiting Clara, the one person who'd ever truly seen me. The life I was building, school, my apartment, my fragile sense of peace, felt like it was crumbling, the ground shifting beneath me. Clara's lawyer called me the next day, her voice crackling with fury over the phone. "This is a sham," she said, her words sharp. They don't have a case, but we'll need to fight it. Clara, meanwhile, was a force of nature, a hurricane in a frail body. She demanded a full mental evaluation, acing every test with a smirk that said she'd been waiting for this fight. "Let them try me," she told me over the phone, her voice fierce, unwavering. "I've been underestimated my whole life." She even got the assisted living staff to write statements on her behalf, confirming her clarity and independence, their words a shield around her. I was terrified, though. My parents were good at this, playing the concerned family, spinning lies that sounded like truth. They'd done it before, at school meetings, with neighbors, making me look like the difficult one while they played the saints. Every hearing felt like a test, their lawyer painting me as a greedy, manipulative daughter who'd isolated Clara for her money. I'd sit in the courtroom, my hands clenched in my lap, feeling their eyes on me, judging, accusing. But their case fell apart fast. Clara's evaluation was airtight. Her doctor testified she was sharper than most people half her age, her memory a steel trap. The staff statements backed her up, their accounts detailed and unwavering. My parents' own lawyer seemed embarrassed by the end, their story unraveling in real time, a house of cards collapsing under its own weight. They tried to backtrack, claiming it was a misunderstanding, that they were just worried about Clara. No one bought it. Word spread quickly. My cousins, aunts, uncles, they all started calling, asking questions, their voices a mix of shock and anger. Apparently, my parents had told everyone Clara was senile, wasting away, her mind gone. No one had checked. Now they were, and the truth was ugly, a mirror held up to their lies. When the dust settled, Clara made a final move, one that felt like a quiet victory. She updated her will, naming me her healthcare proxy. We sat in her room, the air warm with the scent of her chamomile tea, and she looked at me with those sharp gray eyes. "If I can't make decisions one day," she said, her voice steady, "I trust you to make them for me, not them." I asked if she was sure, my voice barely a whisper, overwhelmed by the weight of her trust. She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "They've shown who they are. You've shown who you are." That moment felt like a reclaiming of everything they tried to take. A bond forged in love, not control. I threw myself into my life after that, determined to build something they couldn't touch. I finished my degree in environmental science, graduated with honors, and landed a job with a local conservation group, working to protect the Puget Sound I'd always loved. I rented a better apartment, one with a view of the water, where I could watch the waves glitter under the morning sun. Every Sunday I visited Clara. We'd sip tea, watch the rain streak down her window, laugh at her terrible puns that somehow got worse with age. She lived longer than anyone expected, her spirit fierce until the end. When she passed, it was peaceful, in her sleep, her hand in mine, the room quiet except for the soft beep of her monitor. She left a note, tucked into her favorite book, a worn copy of The Secret Garden. "You gave me purpose, Mara. I hope I gave you yours." I read those words through tears, my heart aching with a mix of grief and gratitude, knowing she'd given me more than I could ever repay. I didn't invite my parents or Ethan to the funeral. Last I heard, Ethan's music career never took off. He's working at a guitar shop now, his dreams gathering dust like his old guitars. My parents don't talk to most of the family anymore, their lies catching up with them, leaving them isolated in a prison of their own making. I don't wonder if they think about me. I don't need to. I have my peace, my purpose, my life. A life I built on my own terms, with Clara's love as my foundation. They chose control over love, and I chose myself. Looking back, I'm not sure what's more shocking, how far they went to erase me, or how long I waited for them to see me. But I found something better than their approval. I found Clara, and I found my strength. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from family to find your peace? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how you reclaimed your life. And if this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. We're building a community of survivors here at this channel, and I'd love for you to be part of it. Let's keep telling these stories together.